Modern combat does not wait. With AI systems and persistent surveillance across the battle space, the timeline for a lethal decision has compressed to seconds. You no longer have the luxury of figuring out your moral code in the middle of a crisis. Moral hesitation in an operator creates a catastrophic strategic vulnerability. At the national level, a localized failure of character can trigger a total collapse. The military calls the solution to this problem spiritual fitness. It is the deliberately developed capacity to act on what you know is right, even when doing so carries a severe personal cost. Because the machine calculates faster than conscience can follow, the operator must already possess the internal discipline to hold the line. You have to become a human anchor long before the fire starts. To train this rapid-fire judgment, the military uses a tool rooted in the ideas of the 19th century strategist Karl von Clausewitz. He understood that the battlefield is, at its core, an ethics problem. Decades later, Helmuth von Moltke the Elder turned that theory into a physical method, the staff ride. He forced his officers out of the classroom and made them walk the actual physical ground where impossible historical choices were made. Standing where a commander stood collapses the distance between you and the history. You stop trying to memorize the right answer for an exam, and you start reckoning with whether you would have possessed the courage to make the hard choice yourself. To test that courage, we travel back to pre-Civil War Virginia. Over centuries, the colonial legal system methodically stripped away the rights of African Americans, engineering racial slavery into a permanent, inescapable caste. A system built on total control fears a mind that can read. After an enslaved preacher named Nat Turner led an armed uprising in 1831, lawmakers realized Turner had been inspired by texts he had read himself. In response, the state weaponized its legal code. Virginia passed strict laws making the simple act of teaching Black children or adults to read a severe crime against the state. This is the environment Mary Peake navigated. Born free in Norfolk, she deliberately chose to cross that legal line. She spent years secretly teaching free and enslaved people in small, hidden groups, absorbing immense personal risk every time she opened a book. When the law mandates ignorance, absolute compliance becomes a moral failure. In an environment where the rules themselves are the source of the wrongdoing, defiance becomes a necessity. In May 1861, the Civil War shattered the status quo. 3 enslaved men escaped to Union-held Fort Monroe. When their enslaver demanded them back, Union General Benjamin Butler deployed a precise legal argument. He declared the men contraband of war and refused to return them. That single legal ruling immediately transformed the military post. Word spread rapidly, and thousands of freedom seekers flooded toward the stone walls of what quickly became known as Freedom's Fortress. The Confederacy understood the threat of this growing sanctuary. In retaliation, Confederate forces marched into the adjacent town of Hampton in August 1861 and burned it to the ground to deny shelter to the escaping population. The fire destroyed Mary Peake's home. Finding a legal pathway through an unjust system is rarely safe. Taking a principled stand often provokes aggressive, destructive pushback from those losing power. Homeless but undeterred, Peake immediately adapted. With the occupying Union Army now providing a lawful path, she moved out of the shadows. She began teaching openly beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient live oak. This historical illustration captures the open-air school she established. The demand for the education denied to them for so long was overwhelming. Her class exploded from 6 students to 50 in a matter of days. She took on a grueling routine, teaching children during the day and running classes for adult Union soldiers at night. And she did all of this while her body was failing, pushing through the final, fatal stages of tuberculosis. Peake reserved defiance for the years when no lawful channel existed. Once one opened, she poured her dying energy into the work, guided throughout by her own internal order. We study Peake to walk the ground of her choices. Now we enter the reckoning phase of the staff ride, translating her history into the operational standards required for you today. This ladder illustrates Maxim 1, confronting wrong rules. As a warfighter, you must exhaust proper lawful channels first, using your chain of command or the inspector general. You reserve absolute refusal only for the top rung, a clearly, manifestly unlawful demand. Maxim 2 dictates that conviction has a cost. Peake risked prison, lost her home, and worked while dying. True integrity is measured by what you are willing to lose. If your conviction costs you nothing, it remains untested. Maxim 3 separates the difficult from the unjust. Peake never confused the sheer exhaustion of teaching with an unfair system. Discipline requires you to separate a true moral objection from a rule that merely causes personal fatigue or bruises your ego. AI will compress the timeline, and the friction of combat will test your resolve. The capacity to act on what is right when the price is highest determines whether an operator functions as a human anchor. That internal order remains the final differentiator.